Fine. So in this particular session, so we'll see about how do we create a pivot table or a pivot table in using the Pandas data frame. Now, generally, when I talk about a pivot table, okay, is nothing but is a data summarization table where we convert a complex row-based data into a tabular format where I say it's a summarized data. So we get more calculated data. Okay. In the table format, we change the layout. We just say table format. Table format in the sense we'll have something called as row headings. We'll have a column headings, and then we'll have a measurable values which we do the calculations, and we get the grand totals and subtotals and so on in a single sheet in the different layout. Now, if I have to create a pivot table, so let us take an example. I have this particular sales data. So here I have almost say 10,000 rows. Okay, so in this particular data, when you look into it, we have the data belonging to a different category of sales. Okay, so yeah, so we have as a different category. We have a separate different subcategory. When you look into it, we have furnitures, we have office supplies, we have technologies. So we have different categories of products, and within that there are some subcategories are there. So that means when you see under furnitures, we have a bookcases, chairs. Okay, so you can see tables under furnitures under each category. So we can see here, so we have a different subcategories, and we have some sales, we have the region wise data and all those things. Now I want to do an analysis, like, what is the total sales for the category wise, or I want to see what is the total sales for the region wise. Okay, in a single table format. So that is where we go to the pivot table. So let us see how do we create a pivot table in this Excel itself first. So for this data, so if I have to create a pivot table, I'll just get into the insert tab. In the insert tab, so we have this power pivot table option. There you can see by default it has selected the whole table range. I'll just say okay. So first time you have the data source, and we can see a pivot table is converting your row based data into this particular format. So where we have the row headings and the column headings, and we have this particular summarized data, but is a calculated data. So now, say example, I want to see each region wise what is the sales. I'll just select the region. Okay, as soon as I select the region, you can see it is added to the row heading. So that means since this is a dimension, so by default it has gone to the row heading. So that means what is the data you want to flow in the row. And then I just want to see with in the row wise, region wise, what is the total sales. So I have the sales value. I just select from the sales. Since it's a numerical field, Excel automatically sends that since it's a numerical field, it by default takes it to the values. And by default, it is applying a sum of sales. And you can see this particular data, what you are getting is nothing but the sales in each region wise. So category, central region, these are sales. East region, these are sales. South region, these are sales. West region, these are sales. This is the grand total. Now I want to see the further informations, like in each region I want to see, like, central region we had almost 50 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 1,329, this is the total sales. In east region 6 lakh 78,000, this is total sales what is being done. But I want to divide this into what you say, the different uh, what is it, category wise in the columns I want to place. So what I will do, I'll just select the category, place it in the column. So you can see, okay, we have this particular data here. So when you look into this particular data, so this total sales of whatever the central is there is been divided. Furniture, this much of contribution. So office supplies, this much of sales. Technology, this is sales. The sum of this is this much. Okay, so same way when you see in this particular downwards, so this is the total sales of the furnitures. In the central region, this was the sale. In the east region, this was the sale. In the west region, this is the sale. In the south region, this is a sale. The total sales of the furniture is this much. The total sales of office supplies, and they can see they have been divided into the each region wise: central, east, south, and west region respectively. Okay, the sum of this. So this complex data we are able to very easily summarize and get the information according to our requirement. Now what we'll do is, Let us see how do we do the same thing with the help of the pandas. Now, first to work with this particular pandas, so first what I will do is I'll try to import this particular data in my pandas. So for importing, what is that I'm doing? Pandas.read CSV, that is actually the CSV file. So I'll just say pandas.read CSV. What is the name of the file? So superstores.csv file, that is the file what I just showed now. And since it is in the form of a CSV file and it has very large amount of data, so okay, we are using this particular encoding as Unicode encode escape sequence. That means it is any special characters in that data, so non-ASCII characters, even that will be read in the Unicode characters, international languages, and so on. Fine, the whole data will be read, and we are trying to read this particular data into the data frame. And once the data is being read, so into the data frame, let me display this particular data frame. So first I'm reading this particular data frame. So that means all the 10,000 rows will be read. You can see here. So it shows row ID, order date, and dot, dot, dot. There are many columns there. So last three columns again, quantity, discount, profit. And you can see totally it has fetched 9,994 rows into 21 columns. When you look into our this one, we have 9,995. Out of this, the first row is the heading. So that is not the data row. So the total number of rows is 9,994 rows. So all the rows and all the columns is been fetched. Okay. Now after it has been fetched, now what I want to do is I want to summarize this. Okay. So for summarizing, we have a pivot table. So again, the data frame has this method called as a pivot table. So I'll just say data frame dot. So we say pivot table. So pivot table is a method of the data frame. So you can see this particular method takes a various argument. The first thing is what data you want to flow in the rows. Okay. So I say in the rows, I want the regions. Okay. So I just drag the regions and placed here in the region. So I just say here, if I want to define that, we use the index. Index is equal to what is that? I want the region. Fine. Then what is the data you want in the summarization? I want the sum of sales. So if you want this particular sum of sales, so we just use this particular function called as add function. That is called as the aggregate functions. Okay. So you can see you get an IntelliSense aggregate function. What type of function I just want to do is sum of sales. Fine, that's it. That's it. I think this two will do. And then this will assign to a data frame is equal to, and I'll just print this data frame now. So now when I run this one, it's a case sensitive, some is in the lower case. Yeah, so we have got that. So we can see here, yeah, see it is dividing the data into the central region. Okay, so that means we can see in the index we have this particular region, and it is applying the aggregate function sum, but it is applying the aggregate function on all the numerical field. Discount portal, postal code, profits. I say postal code and all, I don't want to do a calculation. I just want to do a calculation of the sales column. So in that case, so what is that we do is we specify on what columns you want to apply the calculations. So I say I want to apply the calculation on values column. The values is equal to what is that? The name of the column, sales. Okay. So that is the three arguments I have passed. What is the data you want in the row wise? I want the data in the row wise is region. The calculation value column is going to be the sales, and aggregate functions I want to apply is what type of calculations you want to do, sum. can see here, so we have got this particular data, the region wise, the total sales. It is equivalent to this. So without the category. And when you see this and this, it will be exactly the same value. Yes. The central region, this is a sales. East region, this is a sales. Okay. South region, west region. Yes. So grand total is not there. So you want to get the totals. So we can just say margins is equal to true. So this will show you the totals. Raised to the power of e. So this is showing the totals. Fine. Now, what I want to do is, I want to put the data even in the column wise. If I want to put the data into column wise, so we just say indexes region. So indexing will be for the row wise. You want to get the column wise data, you can just use this particular method, okay, attribute for this pivot table called as columns, and you can specify on what columns you want to do this, what data you want in the columns. Now, according to this, so the data which I want to flow in the columns is the category data. Okay, so I'll just take this, I'll mention the category. So now you can see here the data is divided both into rows as well as in the columns. Yes. So that means you can see the central region furniture sale is this much. The central region office supply sales is this much. Okay, the technology. And you can see this is the east region. Again, it is divided with the furniture, office supplies, and the technologies. I say margin is equal to true, you can see even the grand totals are being displayed, both on the rows as well as the columns. As well as the columns. And this is the grand total. That is raised to the power of e, so it is just that way. You want to rename this instead of all, I want to say it as grand total or thing. So you can rename this. So you can just say, comma, margin name is equal to, what is the name? I just say grand total. Fine. So this is how we create a pivot table in your Pandas data frame. So it's very simple. So data frame has this method called as a pivot table. Yes. So in the case of a pivot table, what happens? The data which is flowing in the form of rows, we are converting this into the table format. So where in the table we have the row headings, okay, and the column heading. So what is the data you want in the row and what is the data you want in the columns? And then we do also have a summarized data, that is a calculated values. So on what field you want to apply the calculation. So that means we are telling, okay, the calculations I want to apply on the sales, okay, and the columns is this, and the regions is your index is your row headings. And what kind of calculations you want? Aggregate function sum, okay, or you want as an average. So you can just say the average function can be given. Okay, whatever the function you want, you can just specify that. Yeah. So when you see this particular aggregate function is mean, so this is giving me the average sale in the each region wise for a particular what to say, category. So it is just like in Excel, what we do, we just go to this and where we have this field settings. It is so here instead of sum of sales, we change this no value field settings. I say I want to go for the average. I say okay. This is giving you the average values. Exactly is this. So what type of calculations you want? So we are just specifying using the aggregate function. And the margins is you want to show the grand totals. You can show this particular margin. By default, margin will be showing as all. So you want to have a custom name for the margin. So you can also specify the margin name and what is that name you want to define. Yeah, this is about your pivot table.